I will call to order our town board regular meeting for April 9, 2018. The time being 7:06 p.m. First item of business is roll call. Ms. Mellenbacher, will you please take roll?
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Miles Baker.
Here.
Cindy Showerman.
Here.
Ken Bennett.
Here.
Paul Rinnemeyer.
Here.
Ivan Adams.
Here.
Mr. Adams, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board.
Madam Mayor, I have a couple changes I'd like to propose on tonight's agenda. First of all, I'd like to swap out item A5, which was a presentation by Mr. Wes Levinci. I would like to propose that we substitute that with a Arbor Day proclamation in honor of Arbor Day, and to add an item C11 to our agenda, moving item C11 to actually C12, which would be a resolution number 2018-39, a resolution approving an agreement to purchase the sale of land between the town of Windsor and Vima Partners LLC for the acquisition of real property located in the LeBoux Farm annexation of the town of Windsor.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rinnemeyer and a second from Ms. Sharman, amending tonight's agenda. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is amended as stated by Mr. Rinnemeyer. Moving on to item 6 is a proclamation. We have one of two proclamations. The first proclamation will be for Arbor Day. If there's anybody here, I believe there is, for Arbor Day, if you would come forward and I will read that proclamation first. Thank you. Whereas 146 years ago, J. Sterling Morton proposed a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, is now observed throughout the United States and the world. And whereas this being the 37th year the town of Windsor, Colorado has been awarded the Tree City USA Award. And whereas trees can reduce erosion, cut energy bills, clean the air, produce oxygen, provide habitat for wildlife, and are a renewable resource giving us fuel, lumber, and numerous wood products. And whereas trees enhance the value of our community and are a source of joy and beauty. Now therefore I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of the town of Windsor, Colorado, do hereby proclaim April 20th, 2018 as Arbor Day. We have present with us this evening somebody from the tree board.
Yes.
Yes, would you like to just give your name, and I don't know, do you want to say something about
I just have
Arbor
a
Day in
brief
conjunction
thing, yeah.
with this?
Wendy Ball from the Tree Board, and thank you, Mayor, for proclaiming Arbor Day. We'll be celebrating Arbor Day on the 20th of this month, which is a Friday, at Grandview Elementary School at 8:20 and the charter school at 9:45. So it's a big celebration for the school kids. Saturday, the 21st, is our tree sale, our annual Arbor Day tree sale. So that'll be happening. And then this Thursday, the 12th, we have all the Arbor Day posters exhibited at the Art and Heritage Center, and we have an open house from 4 to 6. So we'll invite anybody who wants to attend. And then you'll see us back on Monday, the 23rd, when we help ask your help and recognize all the poster winners. So thank you.
Yes, thanks for all you do and everything that the tree board does as well.
We love April. It's a busy month.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
green, and yes, we're looking forward to it.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you all.
Our second proclamation this evening is for National Service Day. I don't know if there was anybody, oh, Come forward, yes, please. So the proclamation for National Service Recognition Day. Whereas service to others is a hallmark of the American character and central to how we meet our challenges. And whereas the nation's citizens are increasingly turning to national service and volunteerism as a cost-effective strategy to meet their needs. And whereas AmeriCorps and Senior Corps participants address the most pressing challenges facing our communities, from educating students for the jobs of the 21st century, to fighting the opioid epidemic, to responding to natural disasters, to supporting veterans and military families. And whereas national service expands economic opportunity by creating more sustainable, resilient communities and providing education, career skills, and leadership abilities for those who serve. And whereas AmeriCorps and Senior Corps participants serve in more than 50,000 locations across the country, bolstering the civic, neighborhood, and faith-based organizations that are so vital to our economic and social well-being. And whereas national service participants increase the impact of the organizations they serve, both through their direct service and by managing millions of additional volunteers. And whereas national service represents a unique public-private partnership that invests in community solutions and leverages non-federal resources to strengthen community impact and increase the return on taxpayer dollars. And whereas national service participants demonstrate commitment, dedication, and patriotism by making an intensive commitment to service, a commitment that remains with them in their future endeavors. And whereas the Corporation for National and Community Service shares a priority with local leaders nationwide to engage citizens, improve lives, and strengthen communities, and is joining with the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, Cities of Service, and local leaders across the country for National Service Recognition Day on April 3rd, 2018. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of the Town of Windsor, do hereby proclaim April 3rd, 2018 as National Service Recognition Day and encourage residents to recognize the positive impact of national service in our community, to thank those who serve, and to find ways to give back to their communities. So you two must be volunteers of some sort, I'm guessing. Would you like to state your name and?
My name's Kayla Evans. I'm an AmeriCorps Vista at the United Way of Weld County.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And my name's Hannah Hostek. I work at the United Way of Weld County, and I manage our AmeriCorps Vista program. So I served for 2 years in AmeriCorps, decided that I was going to continue to serve in another way. So our program at United Way of Weld County has been around since 2007. Since 2007, we've had over 150 members serve here in Weld County. They've served at over 50 organizations. They've mobilized over 100,000 volunteers, and they've raised over $4 million, which is a very impressive number to me personally, and I hope here as well. But yeah, they're here working at nonprofits to help end poverty. So thank you so much for having us here, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for all that you do and for volunteering and being part of the programs and the communities that you serve. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7, Board Liaison Reports. Mayor Pro Tem Baker, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board.
Thank you. I was unable to attend the April meeting, but on the agenda was an update on the capital projects for the first quarter and a discussion of 2019 budget and 2018 through 2020 goals.
Okay, Town Board Member Showerman, Water and Sewer Board, Clearview Library Board.
The Water and Sewer Board hasn't met since my last report. Their next meeting is this coming Wednesday morning. The Library Board met and they had a presentation about their social media contracted services They're working on melding their Friends of the Library and Library Foundation, and their foundation is still looking for board members if anyone in the public is interested. The Friends of Library are going to be hosting summer house parties to get the word out about the library, and they are still looking into some potential USDA financing options for constructing a potential new library, and they're also looking at adding a storage unit at the library. One of their exciting news was they will be upgrading to 1 gig internet service in the library, and then they're going to be hosting a chili cook-off on May 5th.
Okay. Town Board Member Bennett, Planning Commission, Windsor Housing Authority.
Housing Authority has not met since the last time. The Planning Commission met last Wednesday evening. They conducted their public hearing on Weld County Road 76 annexation. It's on our agenda tonight. They also looked at the site plan for the Associates in Family Medicine building. And they looked at the final site plan for the apartments at Eagle Crossing, excuse me.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Historic Preservation Commission, Great Western Trail Authority, and Chamber of Commerce.
There's no update tonight on the Historic Preservation Commission or the Chamber of Commerce. Neither have met since our last update, but both do meet this Wednesday, so I will have a update in 2 weeks. The Great Western Trail Authority meets on the first Thursday of the month. That was last Thursday. We discussed encroachments from some of the landowners along the future stretch of the trail between Severance and Eaton. And thanks to our new board member-elect, Mr. Tom Jones, he'll be able to give a better report on this maybe in the future, but as he's more involved than my little synopsis. But the trail, the overall thought right now is that the trail has most of what it's going to need to be able to get completed from Severance to Eaton, which is the portion of the trail that hasn't been finished. So right now, that's kind of the goal of the Trail Authority, is to be able to get that section complete. So most of our conversation has to do with the finances behind getting that completed, as well as the grants that have been obtained, as well as maintenance of the trail. So that's the best report I think I can give right now.
Okay. Town Board Member Adams, Tree Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor Board.
Okay. Well, first, I want to apologize for making the little noise that you were hearing. I was trying to fold this paper very carefully, and I was doing it right over the microphone. And that's the noise that you were hearing. I apologize for that. And secondly, the tree board report, you heard a lot of it from Wendy Ball, but I'm going to add some things to it that she included, because I'm the liaison for the tree board and Wendy is on the tree board. So I'm going to go ahead with what I spent time typing out this afternoon. So anyway, we have a busy schedule for the remainder of this month. And you heard the proclamation by the mayor tonight. And Thursday, April 12th through the 17th, it's actually a 5-day open house at the Windsor Art and Heritage Museum for the Arbor Day poster and poetry entrance. A lot of kids spend a lot of time either drawing pictures about the Arbor Day or writing a poem. And so there are going to be over 400 posters on display. And it's at the museum, and that's located at 116 5th Street in Windsor. And we'd love to have everybody come and see what the kids have done. At the presentation we're going to talk about in a minute, it's going to be here. Those are just the winners. But those 400 are kids who took the time to celebrate Arbor Day. So anyway, then on Friday, April 20th, she mentioned this, but the first program is going to be at Grandview Elementary School, 8:20 to 9 o'clock. And if you haven't been to one of these, I would encourage you to go. The kids sing, their choirs and the bands perform, so it's not just a little, here you are, thank you, and goodbye. There's a little program in almost all the schools. And so that's the Grandview program. And then the Windsor Charter Academy Middle School, and it's the first time the middle school's done this type of thing, but it's going to be from 9:45 to 10:30 at the Windsor Middle School. On Saturday, I think she mentioned this one, but no, she did not mention this one. But the tree board members will work with the Rotary Club planting trees that were donated in Main Street Park. The tree board went over, looked at the whole park, and decided where do we need, and there's going to be quite a few trees. I don't know the exact number. Mr. Lucas might know. I hadn't heard. Just one? 20. Glad I didn't play ball with you. But anyway, there are going to be 20 trees planted, and they took a whole evening just to decide where they should put them, to try to replace some that have died in the past. And so anyway, that's going to be at 8 o'clock. And then on the 21st, she mentioned this, but there's going to be the annual public tree sale. If you want trees for your yard, you better get them ordered, because I think they only have a few left. And so you can order them and then pick them up on that day. And you're going to pick them up at the forestry office at 190 North 8th Street, and that's just north of the Windsor Middle School. So see, I'm adding some things to it just to, so that she didn't get all the credit for this report. Anyway, let's go on to Monday, April 23rd. And I would like to encourage everyone, and I'm talking to the people out there in the TV audience, to come and see what the kids have done when they receive recognition. And it's kind of a celebration that we as a board give these kids for the work they've done. So that's going to be at 7 o'clock on April 23rd. And then the 24th, we have our regular tree board meeting. So they're going to have a busy month. And as far as the trail board, we met last Thursday, and we met at the Poudre Learning Center, which was a change. We used to meet in Greeley. But there were maintenance reports given by the new director, Bob Hindenraker, and Andy McRoberts. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done from the flooding on the Poudre River. We have a lot of damaged concrete that we have to replace, and so the report was lengthy. I'm not going into all the details on it. The committee report on the revisions of the board's 25-year-old bylaws. They decided it was time to look at the bylaws and change some of them and get back on track. And then the third thing I want to mention is that we're going back to the Trail-a-thon this year, and it's scheduled for June 2nd, beginning at 9 o'clock, and this will be at the Poudre Learning Center. If you haven't been involved, I would suggest that you go and have fun. They use the trail, and they have a lot of different activities, and people that go have fun. So I would encourage you to attend that. That's it. It's a long one.
Okay, well, thank you for your extensive report there, Mr. Adams. I have Downtown Development Authority, nothing to report since my last report. Our next meeting is coming up on April 18th at 7:30 a.m. North Front Range MPO did meet last Thursday at the Greeley Family Funplex, so I have a couple of things from that. First and foremost, the Colorado Department of Transportation is urging schools and communities to participate in Bike to School Day on Wednesday, May 9th. So that's coming up. They also kicked off they're looking to develop a long-range 2045 regional transit program. So it's called the 2045 Regional Transit Element. Last adopted in September 2015, the RTE is now focused on drafting a transit system of the future for the North Front Range MPO region. So once that's completed and accomplished, I'm sure we all will get copies of that, and that will kind of outlay what the transit future looks like and the plan is for Northern Colorado. Also, we have a US 34 Pell study going on. We do have some reports back from the group that we have hired to do the study, and they have 2 dates that are coming up for those who would like to see the current concept plans, what they are proposing for improvements along the 34 corridor. So these are opportunities to share your thoughts about what they currently are envisioning, what they are, because what they're going to do is they have 35 concepts right now that they're bringing down to 12 concepts that eventually they want to bring down to 3 to 5 to 1 single overall plan for that entire corridor. So your opportunities to voice your opinions or your thoughts would be on Wednesday, May 23rd in Evans at the Riverside Library, or Wednesday, May 30th in Loveland at Embassy Suites. Both of those meeting times start at 5. The presentation starts at 5:30, and then it goes from there. There will be concepts on the wall that you'll be able to note and affix your thoughts and folks in place that you can ask questions about. So those are 2 important things that are happening in conjunction with the 34 Coalition PALS study. We did get a report from CDOT that the big Thompson Canyon flood repair and Road 34 up into Estes Park will be opened by Memorial Weekend. So they are hoping that that will open the Thursday before Memorial Day, and it will remain open then for the season. In conjunction, we do have a little bit of an update also for the express lane expansion for North I-25 that is going to go from 402 all the way down to Mulberry, and the exciting news is that Windsor is part of the initial first phase of the construction for the expansion efforts on I-25. So construction efforts will start happening in segment 2, which is 402 to Crossroads, in hopefully, if everything goes right, in 3rd quarter of 2018, and complete by 2nd quarter of 2020. And then they will dive into segment 1, which is the 402 interchange, and that will follow sometime in late quarter of this year of quarter 3, and that will wrap up by the end of 2019. So the exciting news is, if you recall, Windsor put in $1 million toward this $300+ million expansion, and we're going to be one of the first benefactors of the improvements. So, and that completes my report. Our next item is number 8. It is for public invited to be heard. This is for individuals who are wishing to participate on a non-agenda item. Do we have anybody in the chambers this evening who wish to address the board on a non-agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. Consent calendar consists of 3 items this evening: minutes of the March 20th, 2018 special meeting, report of the bills for March 2018, and the official cancellation of May 28, 2018 town board meeting due to that being Memorial Day.
Madam Mayor, I move, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, a motion on the floor from Mr. Rannemeyer and a second from Mr. Bennett, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar is approved unanimously. Moving on to item C, our board action for this evening. Our first item is a site plan presentation for River Valley Crossing Subdivision, second filing, Lot 1. Gavin Kazniski, Associates in Family Medicine, the applicant. Katie Thompson, Ripley Design Incorporated, the applicant's representative. And Mr. Hornbeck is going to be giving presentation. Mr. Hornbeck.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Board. This site plan presentation has been reviewed in accordance with Article 9, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The site is located at the southeast corner of Main Street and 17th Street. Property is zoned general commercial, adjacent to other general commercial properties. The site area is approximately 1.1 acres. Proposed is a two-story building of approximately 7,700 square feet. Approximately 28% of the site is landscaped. There are 72 parking stalls, 10 bicycle spaces provided. The building elevations are predominantly brick and stucco with some accent metal paneling as well. The predominant roof height is 31 feet and additional rooftop features up to 37 feet. The Planning Commission did approve a height waiver to exceed the commercial corridor plan for that predominant roof height up to 32 feet rather than the 30-foot maximum. Additional building perspectives. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan as well as the strategic plan. With that, that's all I have unless you have any questions for me.
Is the applicant here this evening?
I believe so.
Oh, is there anything that you would like to share with us about the site plan presentation? Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Hardbeck? Mr. Bennett?
I think it's kind of important to point out, Planning Commission asked some questions about this. When there's a waiver on the height, the applicant is to show some type of hardship. And so I think it's important to explain to everybody that in this case, if I'm correct, because of the type of medical equipment that needs to go in the building and the floors, it necessitates a little bit higher elevation on that. So I think that was an important point. It wasn't just an architectural design, it was a need for the medical equipment that justified the waiver for the height waiver.
And I believe we were only talking about 2 feet, is that correct?
Correct,
So-
yes.
Any additional questions? What is this facility going to house specifically?
Ask the applicant to maybe elaborate.
Okay. Because I will get this question at Coffee with the Mayor, I'm sure, like
Yeah.
what's going in
Yeah.
and what's it going to be?
The first floor of the building is 2 stories. The first floor is urgent care facility, and
Great.
the second floor is medical office buildings, or medical offices.
Okay. Do you anticipate this urgent care, what are going to be the hours, do you know?
Yes, it will be 7 days a week. At this point, we don't have the hours defined, but we're envisioning something like what we have our sort of flagship West operation at Horsetooth and Shields, which is 8 to 8 every day, 7 days a week.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's, I'd point out that it's a relocation of our existing family practice to this new building, an expansion and relocation, and the addition of an urgent care.
Oh, great. Mr. Bennett?
When would you anticipate being open, in case I get hurt?
Don't get hurt anytime soon. I think we're using a local Elder Construction, and I believe it's April or May of 2019.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know that we've had this request, I've had this request from middle school children all the way up to our senior citizens. So I think they're going to be looking forward to this coming.
We're very
Thank you
excited
very
about
much.
it. Thank you.
Any additional questions before we move on? Okay, moving on to item 2, a second site plan presentation for Falcon Point subdivision, Lot 4. Craig Kraft, the applicant, Patricia Croach, North Star Design Incorporated, the applicant's representative. Mr. Hardbeck.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. This site plan has also been reviewed in accordance with the municipal code. The site location is located on Gierfalcon Drive, which is south of State Highway 392 or Main Street, to the east of State Highway 257. The property is zoned limited industrial or IL. The proposed site includes 4 buildings totaling approximately 43,000 square feet. On the 4-acre site. Also the proposed landscaping of 6.2%, which you may notice is lower than what we typically see. And this is in accordance with the approved development agreement for the subdivision, which did provide additional landscaping in the subdivision to the north, in the portion of the common subdivision. The proposal includes 68 parking stalls. There are 3 to 4 tenant spaces per building. The architecture is metal, predominantly metal, with a brick wainscot along the bottom of the building. The proposal is in conformance with both the comprehensive plan and strategic plan. And that is all I have on this presentation.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Hornbeck on this? Okay. Is this building being built for any particular business, or is it just for speculative?
The applicants indicated to us that it's mostly filled already
They
with
do?
tenants,
Okay.
maybe just a few spots that are yet to be filled.
Okay.
I will ask a question. Paul, is this whole area, there are quite a few new buildings going up in that area. Is there consideration being given to making that area look like a special area of the town, and with the building designs, or is it just each building being designed? I was just curious. You know, was that, maybe not a good question, but.
Each property owner does have a fair amount of flexibility, how they want to design the building. The one thing that the code does require on metal buildings such as this is some sort of brick or stone wainscot to dress up the building on the public side. But other than that, it's more up to the individuals.
Thank you.
Okay. No further questions? Thank you very much. We will move on then to item 3, a public hearing. An ordinance annexing and zoning certain territory known as the Weld County Road 76 annexation to the town of Windsor. John Turner, Hillside Development Group, the applicant. Kristen Turner, TV Group, the applicant's representative. Legislative action, Mr. Hornbeck will lead the discussion, but first I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
I would move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Adams and a second from Ms. Sharman to open the public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And, well, public hearing is been approved 5-1.
Let's make that 6-1. I pushed the wrong button.
Okay. Anyway, public hearing is now open. Mr. Hornbeck.
The next 3 agenda items before you are related to this annexation. The first being the public hearing and ordinance to annex the Weld County 76 right-of-way, and also a resolution making certain findings of fact regarding the annexation in accordance with the state statutes. Regarding the public hearing for the ordinance, this annexation is proposed to include GC, general commercial, and residential mixed-use zoning on this piece of right-of-way. The proposed zoning is consistent with zoning on the adjacent parcel to the south. The purpose of this annexation is to annex only the right-of-way of Weld County Road 76 in anticipation of the Rocky Mountain Sports Park and potential improvements associated to the roadway. The actual development of the sports park will require additional public hearings before the Planning Commission and Town Board. There was a neighborhood meeting held in accordance with the municipal code, and there are a neighborhood summary, meeting summaries included in the packet materials. Additionally, the resolution has been prepared in accordance with the Colorado Revised Statutes, and notification was provided to property owners in accordance with the dates and figures in front of you. At their April 4th, 2018 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the Weld County Road 76 annexation to the town board as presented. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, all testimony presented during the public hearing, and the recommendation. That is all I have on these agenda items.
Okay, are there questions for Mr. Hornbeck? Okay, seeing no questions from the board, this is the segment of the public hearing. So if is anybody in the audience who wanted to come to speak before the board, this would be your opportunity. Just state your name and address for the record as you come forward.
Good evening, board members. I'm Marcia Mayetta. I live at 6711 Stephen Street. I have some questions tonight. I anticipate that traffic will soon increase considerably on 76 all the way to Larimer County 5. Timnath is planning for this with a proposed connector to bypass its main street. There is planned construction on Harmony between Weld County Road 13 and 15, and a traffic light plan for 13 and Harmony. The town of Windsor has listed as a priority road project the widening of Harmony between 15 and 257. This is in conjunction with a sports park, which is not yet even approved. In the sports park plans is an additional traffic light between 15 and 257. In addition, if you do approve the sports park, 76 will bring thousands of tourists right into our neighborhood. Commuters and visitors will seek an escape from Harmony Road. I already have, and 76 will be the alternate route. Construction of the proposed Avery substation north of 76 and east of Bryan Avenue will also be a consideration. A traffic study was done just for the proposed sports park. Will there be an additional study to take into account these impending events and changes? Also, the annexation would cover only 1 mile of 76. Which jurisdiction will be responsible for maintenance? Which law enforcement agency will police our neighborhoods in Weld County and Severance, right next door to a Windsor tourist attraction? Does anyone care to address my questions, or should I not expect that tonight?
So
Ms.
Ms. Mayetta, I believe that you gave a copy of your comments to the Deputy Town Clerk, and we can go on ahead and circulate that to the appropriate staff, and we can respond to you in an appropriate manner. Is that okay?
Thank you, Ms. Garcia.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
ma'am. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicki Lake, and I own a property that's kind of on the corner of 76 and 17. It's an investment property, and I've owned it since '93. And I wanted to get the zoning right, and in 2014, I applied for R3 because I found that it was R2, and it was kind of R2 mixed R3, and somehow in '81, they downgraded everybody to R2. So anyway, I got that done, and I thought someday in the future, I want to maybe subdivide that. And because I have 1.5 acres, and most of it is grass that I just mow. And I have an access on 76. And last year they came, they had a meeting and they said, we're annexing 76 and your access is going away. And I said, you can't do that. It's been there, you know, and they said, no, it's not being used. And I said, it is being used. They said, no, it's not. So I said, yes, it is. Well, they just said, no, it's not, and they're closing it. So there goes my property value, there goes my opportunities. If a sports park does come in right next door to me, I could make it into maybe pads for, like, I don't know, campers. Families come along and camp, and while the kids play ball, I could make it into something positive, because it really isn't real positive to have all these lights and everything. It's not really a positive thing. And so I would like to know what I can do about keeping my access. And I even showed them, or told them, that they even paved the apron. And they said, oh no, that was a mistake. And so I'm kind of behind the 8 ball here, but I wanted to show you a picture because they told me it's not being used, there's weeds there. And so I don't want 76 annexed, because it's, with the ballpark and the annexation and this other thing, I don't know what to do. And this annexation also worries me, that the subdivisions in the county, and if it's in 3 different, we're getting encircled with the county, they can push us into being annexed in. And I need some answers to that. And I'd like to show you this, if I can hand it to you.
You'll need to give it to our clerk.
It's always been there since 1972.
We have somebody else who wishes to speak to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get the vicinity map up there?
Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. My name is Rosalind Leoto, and the address is 36933 County Road 15. And I have a lot of concerns about this annexation, particularly in the way it has been, the homes and the roads and the driveways have been allowed to be put in by Weld County. If you look at the entire mile from County Road 15 to 257, you already have 3 three-way intersections, one at County Road 15 and 76, one at 76 and Northwest Estates, one at 257 and 76. And with the proposed sports park, you're adding at least 2 or 3 more three-way intersections along that road. And in addition to that, you have 8 private driveways along the north side, the south side, and at the intersection at 257 and 76. So you'll have a total of at least 5 three-way intersections, 8 driveways, and you're planning to put one of the world's largest sports parks with an access directly into their facility. So if you annex this, you need to be aware of all the private driveways, the safety issues with people walking, biking. People have horses in Roth. They have them in Soaring Eagle, so people plan to keep using the area for that. And the other thing that comes up is the school bus. You don't have a subdivision you can drive in to stop at. All those 8 driveways, if a school bus has to stop for the kids, they stop right on the road. And currently at County Road 76 and Northwest Estates, there's 2 buses that tag team it in the morning. One comes from the east, one comes from the west. They meet, they block the road to allow the kids safely to get on and off the bus, because Like the other lady said, 76 is becoming a commuter route. They're going off of 74 and using 76. So you already have, the school buses are well aware of it, and they're literally blocking the road at Northwest Estates so that the kids can safely get on there. So if you annex this, that's what you're going to be dealt with whatever future it holds up there. Thank you.
Evening. Douglas Bourne, 7377 County Road 76. Our main concern is the annexation. If I'm looking at the map correctly, it looks like it's on the south side for everything, and that's what we're concerned with, is that the road and everything be pushed to the south and not go north and impeding on the several property owners to the north more so than the south. That is our main concern. By the looks of it, it looks like it's going south, but it's kind of small. That also, along with what they were saying, the speed limit is 40 in that stretch. I know it's Weld County right now. There's only 2 speed limit signs, one on the turning off of 257 onto 76. It's very close and you miss it, and they now have paved that, so people like to drive 50, 60 miles an hour. I like to open it up right there. There's no other stop signs, nothing for a couple of miles. I have 2 kids, one on the way, and the road is already dangerous. If we annex it any more to the north, I'm not going to have much walkway out of my front door. Same with my neighbor to the west. Let's see. I'm a little concerned with the annexation in general of the road, being that they're starting on the south end of the section and not the north end. I think it's a little premature. I believe we should be focusing on the south end, and as we move north, then annex the road and then take property. My other concern is I'm that little white dot up there, just above the blue line. I will now be completely surrounded by the city of Windsor. I would like to stay Weld County, if that's at all possible. We moved out here in '91 for the country living, not city living. So that's my main concerns on those. I don't know if anyone can tell me if it's south side, that's what they're planning. That's what I was told at the earlier meetings, was they were hoping to go to the south with the proposed annex there. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the board on this public hearing item, on this item? Are there any questions now from the board? Mr. McCarter, the applicant is here. Would it be reasonable to have him step forward if I have questions, but I think for the applicant concerning what the related to the improvements?
To the area to be annexed?
Yes.
That seems appropriate to me if he's able to answer that.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak first? If not, I'm going to bring the applicant forward. Okay. Mr. Turner?
Good evening, John Turner, 6379 Crooked Stick, Windsor, Colorado.
Mr. Turner, can you speak to the improvements that you are suggesting and the need for the annexation in conjunction with that?
Annexation was requested at the direction of staff. The only ground that's being annexed is the right-of-way, existing right-of-way. There is no ground. Weld County historically has 30 feet on each side of the section line, and that's the ground being annexed. It's made to take control to get transportation and safety issues addressed. Right now, you can tell This is either a minor arterial or it could be a major arterial. I'm not sure about that because until we actually have a development, until we actually have something approved and work on a phasing plan, a lot of these are immaterial. It's going to stay in its same condition until there's a demand to improve them at the direction of the town.
So was this a proactive measure then on the town's behalf, looking, I mean, because this board has not seen any site plan related to this, so we, I guess we don't know what is anticipated here, other than I'm guessing you're trying to be proactive.
Right,
on
I'm jumping in for Paul because it was actually myself that recommended that the annexations be taking place early on, so that way it reduces the number of parties in the conversation when it comes to access points onto the adjacent roads. So we met early with CDOT and Weld County to talk about the transportation planning on the perimeter of the property. And one of the first comments that Weld County would make would be, please annex the road, because they don't want to have to be involved in any negotiation of improvements that may have to take place in the future. But as Mr. Turner pointed out, all that's taking place with this annexation is annexation of the existing right-of-way. It's not taking any private property owner's property, and it's
So
not.
it's not extinguishing at this point in time any entrances or anything related to that.
Doesn't have anything to do with access points at this point. That would all be determined when we do have a plan for the road and the adjacent improvements. So I'll turn it back over to Paul, but I believe we're still waiting for the sports park to resubmit with their latest and greatest proposal. I believe phase 1 is changing somewhat, and so until we have those submittals, we really can't speak to what phase 1 looks like.
Okay, so just to clarify, you made this request of the applicant based on it was actually requested from Weld County?
Correct.
Okay.
Anytime that we're accessing an adjacent county road, we annex the complete cross-section.
Mr. Baker?
Can anyone speak to the woman that is losing access to her property? Like, it's not our road yet, so I can't imagine Windsor did something like that.
Yeah, excuse me. We're not familiar with exactly the access point or which property, and it's not a conversation that we've had with her. I wonder if it was a conversation with Weld County or the developer, but it was not a Town of Windsor conversation.
Thank you. Weld County, okay.
But it was the annexation into.
We can't take anything that you're saying from your seat for the record, so if you need to add anything to your testimony, you need to come back up in front. Did you want to hear a complete answer?
Sure,
Mr.
yeah,
Baker?
come on.
Okay. Please step forward.
It was Weld County, but they said it was being annexed into Windsor. And so Windsor would require this closing of the road. Does that make sense?
No.
No.
Well,
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense that they.
And I'm
yeah,
saying the
and I
applicant
signed a
shook his head.
Mylar map with it where it said close.
That's
I'm sorry.
not something that, yeah, I'm seeing our planning staff shake their heads, so I
So
don't.
once it's
so-
annexed, then it's gonna be left in the condition it currently is. Right? I mean, that's what Mr. Turner said.
But if I ever want to do anything with it, then I have to get it reopened, I guess. But they said for now, they're not putting up a fence or anything. They're just leaving it open, but it's going to be closed when it's annexed.
No.
Clarify that. Weld County said that once we annex it, they would close the access?
Yes, they were closing unnecessary annex or
You're right.
access point. I'm right there.
Okay, I think the part, she's right in here, and I believe that's already annexed to the city of Windsor, and this is the part that we're discussing now, which is still Weld County.
Oh,
Somebody
okay,
can
I
correct
see.
me if I'm wrong.
So
So at
that's-
the point when they did annex it, that's Weld County. But now this section should it currently be city of Windsor, is my understanding.
So I don't have access, is that correct?
And you're looking at access, if I know your property, it's down in this little corner, right?
Yes, it's
Or somewhere over
right there.
You have access.
Mr.
That's
Hunbeck,
half
can
that.
you
Yeah,
draw
that's-
any clarification?
If it's an undeveloped parcel, then when the property develops, it would require site plan review, and access would be looked at from a safety perspective at that time, so that's how it would be dealt with.
Okay,
When development occurs.
Correct,
When
yeah.
developed.
okay.
But we're not planning on cutting off access once we annex.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bennett?
One of the advantages of accessing is that we have more to say about what happens in this roadway, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Any additional final questions? Okay. Seeing none, then we have satisfied, I believe, for the record. I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett and a second from Mr. Renemeyer to close the public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Public hearing is closed. Moving on to item 4, resolution number 2018-34. A resolution making certain findings and conclusions of law pursuant to sections 31-12-110 Colorado Revised Statute concerning the Weld County Road 76 annexation to the town of Windsor. John Turner Hillside Development Group, the applicant. Kristen Turner TB Group, the applicant's representative. This is a legislative action. Mr. Hornbeck, did you have anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Seeing none, I would seek a motion for this resolution.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2018-34.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Renemeyer and a second from Ms. Sharman, approving resolution number 2018-34. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to ordinance number 2018-1558, an ordinance annexing and zoning certain territory known as the Weld County Road 76 annexation to the town of Windsor. John Turner Hillside Development Group, the applicant. Kristen Turner TB Group, the applicant's representative. This is first reading and legislative action. Mr. Hornbeck.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Do we need to take any further public comment, or will we take that in second reading?
Second reading, thanks.
Okay. Then I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 2018-1558 as presented.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Ms. Sharman and a second from Mr. Bennett approving ordinance number 2018-1558. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6, a public hearing. A resolution approving the First Amendment to an intergovernmental agreement between the Town of Windsor and Town of Severance regarding development within the State Highway 257 and Harmony Road corridor. Legislative action, presentation from Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. In order to accommodate the anticipated development.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need
Excuse
to
me.
have a motion to open public hearing.
We do need to open a public hearing.
Sorry.
Madam Mayor, I move to open public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Public hearing is open. I apologize. Go ahead.
In order to accommodate the development anticipated in and surrounding the Rocky Mountain Sports Park, the development standards in the attached IGA with Severance do need to be amended. Severance representatives have indicated their willingness to allow this amendment, and we have prepared the attached First Amendment to the IGA between Windsor and Severance. This amended IGA would defer to the standards in the proposed planned unit development, or PUD overlay, that is proposed with the Rocky Mountain Sports Park. The PUD application is pending and has not yet been presented to Town Board for approval. In accordance with the municipal code, the intent of the PUD regulations is, among other things, to provide flexibility in land planning and development, resulting in amenable relationships between buildings and ancillary uses, and permitting more intensive use of land where well-related open space and recreational facilities are integrated into the overall design. Should Town Board approve a PUD for the sports park property, these development standards would be addressed in that PUD. Under the proposed amendment to the IGA, those requirements would supersede the IGA for the portions of the sports park that lie in the corridor of the IGA. Once the PUD application is ready to be scheduled, it will come before both Planning Commission and Town Board for public hearings. So this is essentially a first step in that process of first amending the IGA and then coming in with a PUD to set unique standards for the property. Staff recommends that Town Board adopt the resolution approving the First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the Town of Windsor and Town of Severance regarding development within the State Highway 257 and Harmony Road corridor. Simple majority of those participating is required. And Mr. McCarger has been working on the IGA, so if he has anything to add, he can do so as well.
So let me just add a little bit to the legal side. The draft IGA amendment was submitted to the Town of Severance. The Board of Trustees looked at it and asked that I add the reciprocity language that appears toward the end of this document, just to make certain that if the Town of Severance needed us to look at a planned unit development model for their side of the corridor, that we would be willing to do that. So that is an important piece of mutuality that's built into the IGA amendment. The existing IGA does have a method for variances of the standards. So what we're really doing is substituting what will eventually be the PUD land use model for what could be variances under the existing model. So this is just pre-approving the PUD as the standard, and then you will eventually have a public hearing, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing, and the PUD will come before you with the specifics so that you can look at it as a integrated whole, as opposed to isolated variances of standards under the existing IGA. So it allows you to substitute the PUD and your judgment under the PUD for the standards that are in the existing agreement.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hornbeck or Mr. McCarter? Okay, Ms. Schoen.
So just to clarify, with this agreement, we're saying that the PUD would be sent to Severance for review and comment, but it would not require them to take any formal action approving it. That would still lie in our hands, and vice versa if it was a PUD in their section?
That's right. The existing agreement requires us to refer land use proposals within the corridor to each other before we take official action on those. So the PUD and any other land use approvals that the applicant wants us to take would first go to Severance. There's roughly a 30-day comment period built into the existing agreement. That doesn't change under this amendment.
So with the reciprocity in there, is there any concern that should they decide to vary from the standards put in the IGA via the PUD process, that we could comment and say, we don't like X, Y, and Z because, and they could say, well, we don't care, we're doing it anyway?
Well, I do, the land use decision is left to each jurisdiction. The referral and comment piece of the agreement just allows you to take into account each other's perspectives on what you're proposing for this corridor. So, yeah, in effect, that if comments are made to us, we don't necessarily have to follow them. They are non-binding, and vice versa.
So essentially, doesn't this create a loophole to the entire design standards of the IGA?
It could, but the idea is that the PUD is going to be presented as an integrated whole so that you can see those portions of the PUD that stray from the existing standards in a complete package, so you'll understand how they fit and why they're where they are, instead of isolated variances like you might have done in the Board of Adjustment. So yeah, I think you could look at it as a loophole, but the PUD has two public hearings, one before you, one before the Planning Commission, burden of proof on the part of the applicant, and a really specific view of not only the stuff that varies from the standards, but how it fits within the overall development plan.
But in theory, you could have a PUD that the entirety of it strays from the design standards of the IGA.
Yes.
Okay.
You could.
Any additional questions from the board? Seeing none, I will open this portion to the public who wish to speak to the board on this public hearing item. Is there anybody who wish to come before the board on this public hearing item this evening? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. McCarter, do you have anything further to add?
Nothing further for the record, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
I would move we close public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Adams and a second for Mr. Rennemeyer to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is closed. Moving on to item 7, resolution number 2018-35. A resolution approving the First Amendment to an intergovernmental agreement between the Town of Windsor and Town of Severance regarding development within the State Highway 257 and Harmony Road corridor. Legislative action. Mr. Hornbeck, anything further?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anything further from any board members? If not, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we approve resolution number 2018-35.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Adams and a second for Mr. Bennett, approving resolution number 2018-35. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, resolution number 2018-36. A resolution approving a non-binding term sheet between the Town of Windsor and Bro Infrastructure Development, LLC, regarding a project delivery agreement for provision of treated water to the Town of Windsor. Legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's before you this evening is a resolution authorizing the acting town manager to sign a term sheet. The term sheet is non-binding, but it contains some fairly important objectives that have been under discussion with Bro Infrastructure Development for the better part of a year. Those discussions were by agreement confidential, but we are prepared tonight to talk about going to the next step when it comes to the terms of understanding. What is proposed is a water treatment plant at the Great Western Industrial Park that will treat water brought up from wells through reverse osmosis technology. That would bring an additional roughly 1,300 acre-feet per year of treated water to Windsor's water utility customers. But as you might imagine, in order to build a reverse osmosis treatment plant capable of generating 3 million gallons of water a day, it takes money. and it takes a lot of care to work out the terms of engagement over how that will be done. The term sheet is just an outline of where we expect to go. The term sheet has us first negotiating a letter of intent by July 2nd of this year, and the target date for a full agreement is the end of September of this year. The idea will be during that period of time to work out the terms for financing what we suspect will be close to $100 million in infrastructure, including the treatment plant, brine disposal, and water rights that are needed to augment the well depletions as they're brought up from underground. The term sheet is the first step in talking with Bro Infrastructure Group about a novel but proven form of water treatment, reverse osmosis. And we suspect that in the coming months we'll have an opportunity to further examine the engineering and the finances that will go into this. I am recommending that you authorize us to go forward with this. The only other thing I want to mention is that the only portion of the term sheet that is binding is the exclusivity paragraph, section 5. And section 5 says that Windsor will not talk with anyone else about reverse osmosis water treatment, but we are still free to carry on the activities of the water utility when it comes to plant investment capacity, water rights acquisition, the proposed regional treatment plant concept, and also the Northern Integrated Supply Project, NISP, that the town board was speaking of earlier. So in general, the exclusivity clause is quite specific to reverse osmosis, but also allows us to carry on the activities that you would expect of a water utility. So my recommendation is that you do approve the term sheet this evening.
Okay, questions, Mr. Baker?
Yes, and on page 2 of the term sheet, item 1D mentions brine management assets, including deep injection disposal wells. Would that be for fracked wastewater possibly as well?
I don't believe so. What we've been told is that a brine disposal injection well is an entirely different permitting process under the EPA's rules than it would be for hydraulic fracturing fluids. So this is a different permitting process altogether. It's a different elevation underground. And as far as I know, the plan is to simply dispose of the brine that is generated by the reverse osmosis plant. And certainly I would focus in our negotiations on restricting it to that purpose, because the town ultimately is paying for it. And we would want to set it aside for brine disposal only.
Yeah, because I guess until we learn more, that it almost feels like a non-starter for me to allow wastewater disposal on the Great Western property.
Well, and we haven't even talked about where that disposal well will be, but I do understand your concern, and we've talked with the engineering firm that is working on this component of the plant. And from what I understand, it isn't intended to take just any disposable waste. It is intended to take the brine generated by this plant.
Okay. And it says also that we could maybe court other municipalities to treat their water, and that would offset our cost for the bonds?
What we've been talking about is bringing in other potential customers who would receive the water through Windsor's system. There's a possibility that the Bro Infrastructure Group could figure out a way to pipe water from this plant to other locations, but right now the conversation is strictly with Windsor.
Okay. And what do they get out of this?
They have an opportunity to use the industrial park for something that is industrial in nature. They have an opportunity to sell us some Whitney water rights that really can't be used for anything but this. There's a whole history to the Whitney water rights. It's an opportunity to develop something unique. And of course there is some development fee, some percentage that will go with this for the service that we're being offered for development of the project.
Any additional questions, Mr. Adams?
I am. Looking at the same topic terms, I was considering and looking at G, and I don't want to have to read the whole thing, but I guess my concern is, I think I read it as saying that the project company can actually bring in any other company and to bring water to them. And I guess my question is, who's going to benefit from that, and how does Windsor benefit from it?
The idea of bringing in more players, more customers, if you will, for the plant is to build economies of scale into the plant. So a 1 million gallon per day plant costs a lot of money. Once you start fastening other units to it and making it capable of treating more and more water, the cost per unit falls. And so if there is a way for any of the players to bring another partner in to reduce the cost and increase economies of scale, this term sheet allows us to explore that further.
And the last comment you made, does that mean that they have to explore it with Windsor, though? They just can't do it?
Right. Well, what it means is we will explore how to go about bringing other players into it. This agreement or this term sheet says that everybody gets a voice in that, and that's where I would likely go as we negotiate the letter of intent and the final agreement.
So, in other words, that just means a good negotiation procedure has to be in place to make this happen.
Absolutely.
Happen well, anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Mr. McCarter?
I have a couple more.
Mr. Baker?
Once will we get numbers on the lifespan? You know, once we own this at the end of the term, will it still be functional? Is it feasible? Is the technology going to change?
So part of what we want to be able to do during this negotiation phase between now and July and from July onward is to examine the engineering. Dennis Wagner and I have been in a lot of meetings, and we've been told a lot of things about this technology and about this plant. But until we have a chance to actually look at the engineering studies that Bro Infrastructure Group is relying on, but also have our own consultants look at that data to vet that for us, we are not going to go forward with a binding agreement until we know more about what we're buying.
I'd just like to see more also on the necessity. I mean, we all know we need water. That's not up for debate. But is this better than getting it somewhere else and treating it at a different facility that we've talked about even tonight's work session? Is that all going to be analyzed?
Yes. And Dennis has done preliminary analysis of the numbers, and there's still a lot of conversation to be had about the cost.
Because I'd like to see it proved out that it's in our benefit to have now 2 of our own treatment facilities, or 1 and a piece of another one.
Right. Yeah, that's the idea. And until we get the engineering, until we see the financial modeling, we probably don't want to go forward into anything that's binding.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Mr. Rennemeyer, did you have?
Well, I wanted to question the July 2nd, 2018 period of exclusivity. Was that picked because it's 90 days out? Is that, I mean, I know that this was one of your concerns, I guess, is this exclusivity clause, which obviously does. Can you just speak to that, how we got to that date, or like? What?
The other party to this conversation is in a place where they want to move things along. A 90-day window to negotiate another non-binding document seemed reasonable to us. If we take a look at the engineering and determine that it's just impossible, that it can't be done, then we walk away and we're done. And then the exclusivity clause lapses. But if we stay at the table and work something out, then I would expect that in that document, in the LOI, the letter of intent, there would be more exclusivity rather than less.
But it's a reciprocal exclusivity because we're the only ones they're bringing
Correct.
this to as well during this time period, as well as So it's reciprocal on both sides of exclusivity.
That's right.
So would we have to go through another term sheet if we get to that date and we still, I mean, would the whole thing be up for renegotiation then?
If we get to that date and we don't have the letter of intent done, we may extend it. If we get to that date and it appears the letter of intent can't be worked out, we may just walk away. It really depends on, to me, it depends on the financial and the engineering data and our ability to make sense of it between now and then.
And our ability to make sense of it, you feel like that date is realistic at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Just had a quick comment. I just want to thank you for your work on the exclusivity portion. I know when we discussed that, we had some concerns that this wouldn't tie our hands in regards to other things, and so I really appreciate you getting that to a point where we could move forward with this, but not tie our hands on other projects.
Sure. It was important because we didn't want this agreement to tie the hands of our water utility.
Right. And I'm gonna assume that Bro's in agreement to what you're submitting to us?
Yes.
Okay, they've seen this? Okay. Okay. If there are no further questions, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2018-36.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer and a second for Ms. Showerman approving resolution 2018-36. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9, resolution number 2018-37. A resolution approving the final site plan for Eagle Crossing subdivision, 4th filing, lots 1 and 3. Morgan Kidder Fossil Ridge Holdings LLC, the applicant. Brian Williamson, TST Consulting Engineers Incorporated, the applicant's representative. This is quasi-judicial. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The resolution before you for final site plan approval has been reviewed in accordance with Article 4, Section 17 of the Municipal Code. The subject property is approximately 21.6 acres. It was rezoned by Town Board in January of this year from limited industrial to multifamily, MF2. And a preliminary site plan was approved by Planning Commission in October of last year. Again, the zoning is MF2, adjacent to limited industrial uses to the east and commercial uses, commercial zoning to the west. The site plan characteristics include a total of 407 dwelling units. There will be 4 two-story residential buildings with 14 to 16 units each, and those are located on the eastern portion of the property. The remaining 15 buildings will be 3 stories with 21 to 24 units apiece. 620 parking spaces are provided, including 120 detached garage spaces and 500 open air spaces. Approximately 21% of the site is building coverage and 46% is landscaped area. Included in the site plan as amenities are a playground, clubhouse, and pool for residents. The building characteristics include a horizontal fiber lap siding as a predominant facade material, a stone treatment around the base of buildings and the stairwells, covered decks and porches, a 512 roof pitch with varying roof lines. So the 21 unit building and the 24 unit building vary slightly in paint scheme, and similarly the 14 and 16 unit with some slight variations. There are off-site improvements associated with the Eagle Crossing subdivision 4th filing, which would be serving this development. Those include the construction of Steeplechase Drive from Fairgrounds Avenue to Highland Meadows Parkway. Additionally, that street would have a 10-foot wide public trail along the north side. The extension of Ward Drive north from its current terminus in Loveland to connect with with Fairgrounds, I'll get it right, Steeplechase Drive, as well as a regional detention facility. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, Chapter 5B Growth Framework, the goal of which states maintain the character of the community while accommodating future growth that is fiscally and environmentally responsible. And the staff analysis on that portion of the comprehensive plan is as follows. The proposal respects the character of the area through the siting of the project over 600 feet away from the nearest single-family homes, and by limiting the easternmost buildings to 2 stories in height, and also by the use of upgraded architecture. One area that staff has identified as a potential impact to community character is the parking. Staff is concerned that parking provided may be insufficient to accommodate the parking demand. If parking is insufficient, it's likely people would park in the fire lanes on the property or in the bike lanes on Steeplechase Drive. Steeplechase is not designed to accommodate on-street parking, and such parking would likely create potential health, safety, and welfare concerns. This project is unique to Windsor in both its size and location. The 407 units are the largest multifamily project Windsor has seen. Previously, the largest was the South Hill 4th and 5th filings, which had 196 units associated with it. This location is also unique in that there is no on-street parking available in the vicinity to accommodate any overflow parking. Additionally, the current lack of services and employment in the area would dictate that the majority of residents and visitors would rely on personal automobiles to get to and from the site. While the site plan does meet the minimum parking requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per multifamily unit in the municipal code, it does not provide any designated visitor parking or overflow parking. The 407 units proposed do result in a required parking of 611 spaces, and 620 spaces are provided. For reference, the 196 units at South Hill I mentioned a moment ago were required to provide 294 spaces and actually exceeded that and provided 335 spaces. As the first development of its size in Windsor, it's become apparent the municipal code may not adequately address multifamily parking for this type of development, and staff will be working with the consultant on the municipal code to address that issue. The applicant did volunteer that this product has been built elsewhere in northern Colorado in other communities. One such product is the Creekview Apartments in Greeley, and staff visited that apartment complex on a Saturday morning to take a look at parking there. It's worth noting that that development, they did indicate, is 100% leased, so at capacity. What was observed there was that parking was sufficient, but parking was provided at a greater ratio in that development. The parking ratio used there was 1.86 parking spaces per unit compared to 1.52 proposed with this development. As a point of reference, the parking generation manual, which is published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, suggests a peak parking ratio of 1.94 spaces per unit for the 85th percentile, meaning that 85% of sites will have peak parking at or below that level. The Creekview project in Greeley included 348 units, and the Greeley code required 647 parking spaces. When staff visited that complex, approximately 362 of the required 439 spaces were observed to be occupied. It was not possible to determine the number of garage spaces that were occupied or perhaps otherwise used for storage or other uses. There is also on-street parking available in that Greeley development with a capacity of approximately 115 spaces, and staff observed approximately 55 of those spaces occupied and determined those were predominantly residents of the multifamily development, given the surrounding vacant land uses and single-family homes with driveways and 2 to 3 car garages. During the public hearing for the rezoning of this property, there were a number of concerns expressed by neighboring residents, including the potential for decreased property values of surrounding homes, the overall concern about too much density, and possibly negative impact on quality of life for surrounding homeowners. A shortage of parking would likely contribute to these items of concern. The concerns outlined above have been shared with the applicant, who has not chosen to provide any additional parking or reduce the number of units. Despite the concerns about the potential shortage of parking, it is acknowledged that the proposal meets the minimum parking standards of the code, and therefore staff is compelled to recommend approval of the site plan. Should parking prove to be insufficient, it would ultimately be the landowner's responsibility to prevent unauthorized parking in fire lanes or other circumstances that present safety concerns. One factor that may help mitigate parking concerns is the fact that none of the surrounding property is developed, so the property owner would have the potential to acquire additional parking or make arrangements to accommodate additional parking should that prove to be necessary. The proposal is also in conformance with the Objective 1, prioritize new growth in areas currently served by town infrastructure. The staff analysis is that the applicant will be responsible for extending Steeplechase Drive and other roads to serve the area. The applicant will also be responsible for extending water and sewer, which are provided by the Fort Collins Loveland Water District and South Fort Collins Sanitation District. The proposal is also in conformance with Chapter 5C, Residential Areas Framework Plan. The staff analysis on that section is that the multifamily housing stock identified by the municipal code as a shortage will be helped by this project in providing additional choice for residents, and also it will be in close proximity to the Brands East commercial development. The proposal is also in conformance with the strategic plan, particularly the prosperous local economy and safe, well-planned community with spirit and pride. At their April 9th, 2018 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation to Town Board, recommendation of approval, subject to the following conditions. And before I go through those, I do want to point out condition 2B, which the Planning Commission included on the recommendation of staff, has subsequently been addressed through other means. So staff is recommending that that be removed from the conditions of approval. So condition 1, all outstanding staff comments on the site plan drawings shall be addressed. Number 2, prior to building permits being accepted for review, the applicant shall A, enter into a development agreement with the town, which shall not be recorded until after the Eagle Crossing subdivision 4th filing plat has been recorded. What's proposed to become 2B would be present evidence to the town that an easement granting temporary rights to the developer to construct the off-site improvements depicted on the improvement drawings and permanent exclusive rights to the town for the storm drainage facility. And C, what would become C, is present a written undertaking under which the Brands East Metropolitan District will permanently assure the ongoing maintenance of the drainage facilities, adjacent recreational trail, and surrounding landscaping on Tract A of Fossil Ridge subdivision, second filing, and the yet-to-be-created tract required, that part can be struck as well, as that's been addressed. The very end of that last sentence. And number 3, in the event that issues arise due to lack of sufficient parking stalls provided on site, the property owner shall take appropriate measures to address such issues. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, and the recommendation. The applicant does have a presentation they'd like to share with you, unless there's any immediate questions for staff.
I'd like to ask.
Okay, Mr. Rennemar?
Mr. Hornbeck, I'm a little confused tonight. You read to me a page and a half about other communities that have different parking standards and ratios and everything else. I'm a little bit concerned as to what that has to do with, if this property in question, if the applicant has met our current standard at 1.5 spaces, why are we looking at what other places do as part of the record on this when that's not what the current ordinance in Windsor requires?
I believe the very first paragraph of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code states to the effect that these standards being the minimum for the health, safety, and welfare. So that parking standard is a minimum for one, and staff has identified parking as a potential threat to health, safety, and welfare if it's provided at the current level. The applicant provided the Greeley example as somewhere where parking works, so that's why it was included in this analysis.
I just didn't see where it was relevant. I mean, it seems like it's a work session topic for us to talk about future ordinance changes versus including that for the record on this when the applicant has met the requirements that have already been, that are already rule of law in Windsor.
I thought I enumerated the concerns of health, safety, and welfare. That's why those were presented to you. It's your discretion on which action you choose to take.
Okay, I was just curious for the explanation on that.
Any additional questions? Mr. Baker?
A couple questions. You say that there's potential parking on Steeplechase?
There's no potential parking.
Okay, because they can't park there, right?
Correct.
So that's not an option.
Correct.
What about Ward Drive, that new road or street? Will there be parking on there?
I believe that's designed with no parking. Yeah, from the drawings, it looks like there's no parking on Ward as well.
Okay. What about staff? Do we know how many staff will be working at any one time?
I do not know.
Okay.
I'll have some questions and comments, but I'd like to see their presentation first.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, if we could have the applicant come forward to
They might answer.
complete the presentation. And just for clarification then, the applicant, the current parking though does meet our current code and it does meet currently what we ask in the comp plan.
Comprehensive plan doesn't address parking ratios. It does meet the municipal code, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and board members. My name is Brian Williamson. I'm with TST Consulting Engineers. I'm the planner and landscape architect for this project. We have a very brief presentation. Paul's done a very good job going over all the nuts and bolts of the project, so we just have a couple little things to add. I just want to show you a rendered plan. It's just a little bit more attractive than the plan that was in your packet. And Paul did a great job describing that the 4 buildings that are east of Ward Drive would be, or Ward Road would be 2-story, and then the 15 buildings to the west are going to be 3-story. So kind of transitioning from that single family to from a less intense to more intense unit density. There are 407 total units mixed between 14, 16, 21, and 24 building units per building. The same recap of Paul's parking statistics. 8 parking garages totaling 120 spaces, and then 500 surface parking spaces for a total of 620. The town standard is 1.5. That brings us to a total of 611 required The parking was shown in our preliminary plan was reduced slightly. We showed 645 spaces there. The reason for that reduction was not that we were trying to come closer to the minimum. It was that our buildings were 20 feet apart in that preliminary plan. And in order to keep the penetrations that are in the sides, basically keeping the windows and the balconies that are in those side units, we needed to move them to 30 feet for the building code. So as all those buildings spread out, we lost 25 spaces. We felt we were still meeting the standards set forth in the land use code, so we were still bringing the project to you guys. We did try to find as much on-site parking as we could. We actually have continued to refine throughout our submittal process to add as many parking spaces as we can. Some of the other amenities, there's a pool and clubhouse, there's a large playground with a 5 to 12 age large structure, some climbing boulders, swings, a seesaw and net climber. There is the regional trail along Steeplechase that Paul mentioned, and then a natural walking trail in the detention pond that'll be a soft surface. These are some examples of the playground equipment, and then these are the same elevations that Paul presented to you. So we're available, myself and Morgan Hitter are here, and we're available to answer any questions that you might have.
I do have.
Okay.
I had a couple of questions and a couple of comments.
Sure.
Question, first of all, traffic study, particularly pedestrian, this came up with the planning commission. You have apartments on the south side of Steeplechase, the clubhouse and playgrounds on the north side. What was our plan as far as crosswalks, possible traffic light at Ward? The question was about children crossing the street and those type of things.
I don't think that the traffic volumes or the Windsor standards would allow for a traffic light at the Ward and Steeplechase intersection. The projected volumes there are just not even close to the warrants for a signal. We do have a mid-block or a mid-street pedestrian refuge area. So because there's no, the way Steeplechase is laid out is there's one through lane in either direction, and then there's a center lane that's used for turn lanes. Because there's no northbound turn lane from coming from the west here, we did put a center pedestrian refuge island there, so you can cross halfway, basically crossing one set of traffic, which is only one lane, have a pause, a refuge area, and then be able to cross the other lane of traffic.
And my second question, Brian and Mr. Williamson, you shared at the Plan Commission that a similar project to this is 9% occupied, I think you said, and there's been no evidence of a traffic or a parking problem.
Yeah, I think Morgan would have to answer those questions.
Okay,
I don't have the.
My question is, what I heard was in that the project very similar to this, 9% occupied, no parking problems. My question is it 100% built out?
That project at this current time is not fully built out. I misspoke at the Planning Commission. We do not project there to be a traffic or a parking issue at that project. Very similar size, and it does have the same 1.5 spaces required per unit.
How many?
That's 1.5. Okay, and that was in another community in northern Colorado.
Is it the same composition of unit size, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom?
Yes, it is.
I have a couple comments. First of all, I really wanted to acknowledge the applicants, the developer, the staff. This project has a little bit of a history to it, and I really appreciate and acknowledge that the apartments have been moved further west than what we originally saw a long time ago. Also, the first 4 buildings, as I understand, are no more than 2-story. And those are the concerns that neighbors had, so I want to acknowledge the give and take and that's gone on this project. The parking, I gotta say I'm a little concerned about it. Based on what we see in other communities, I would agree that our present code is probably inadequate. And I'll be voting for this because it does meet our code right now, okay? But I gotta say, I think our present code in situations like this where there's no off-street parking is probably inadequate. And I'm a big believer in being proactive versus reactive. And since it's still green space, and I know there's a lot of concerns in engineering, I have faith in you to the point that I'd almost say an expectation and a hope that you can find maybe an auxiliary parking spot adjacent to this, or maybe something that can be shared with other parts of the development of Brands East, or maybe some internal streets for off-site parking. It's just a lot cheaper and a lot easier to be proactive than a year from now trying to figure out how to deal with traffic tickets and reacting. So that's my comment to you.
Certainly appreciate it.
I have a question. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Hornbeck for including the comparisons. I think that's helpful to see where we're deficient. And, one of your conditions was that they would be obligated to mitigate a parking issue should it arise. What is the mechanism for that? And how do we know if it's arisen?
To answer how we would know if it's arisen, I think if there are people parking in fire lanes at the complex or in the bike lane on Steeplechase.
But that's illegal.
Or, sure. So if PD is issuing tickets or fire marshals observing people in fire lanes, then I think we identify that as a concern. Also might be hearing from neighbors if there's concerns. As to how it would be addressed, that was a condition Planning Commission wanted to see. They didn't get into specifics. I think they left it open-ended to leave the applicant different options to address it, trying to take a middle ground.
Okay. Well, my comment, I'm going to support as well. They've met our conditions. I'm really disappointed in the parking. I think Windsor's a great community, and what makes us great is by exceeding the minimums. I don't think you guys have done that tonight, so I'm disappointed in that, but I'll be voting for it.
I have a question and then a comment too. Are there the entryways into the main, I guess, the main building site? There's 3 entryways off of Steeplechase, it looks like, is that correct? Into the complex?
I believe there's 2 primary, one on the east end, one more centrally. There's 3, yeah, plus 1 emergency.
Okay. And the fire marshal or whoever has to oversee this has approved those entranceways in and out for the amount of residents?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I too am going to support this, but I will say that I'm not sure that we can put the onus on the applicant when they are following our code, which shows them what this parking spaces are, and they even exceeded that. So they did exceed the parking spaces. So, I mean, I think that is on us. And so I'm glad that we have acknowledged this and are going to be looking at it in the future to perhaps change and amend the code so we don't have this issue moving forward. So with that said, are there any final questions?
Well, I wanted to
Mr. Adams.
make a comment and ask a question. Since Paul and the 2 gentlemen are up here, I've lived through this in multifamily as the president of association, and I'm just wondering if your department can make another type of recommendation that when the building gets involved, that the recommendation be that they have to do a survey and check with the families how many are actually using the 2 spaces in the garage. You know, because I think they're going to find in those types of living homes, you know, there's only 1 car or maybe none, and it's used as a storage area. And I don't know if you can do that or not, but I know in our case it helped to come up with parking spaces. I don't know, can you make that kind of a recommendation as part of your plan?
Well, the garages, and I think the applicant could speak better than I could, there are less garages than units. So not everyone has a 2-car garage. It's going to sit empty. As far as, you know, surveying what's used, and it sounds like it would be logistically challenging, but if that's the direction of town board, that's something we could do.
I was just hearing a lot of comments about parking being the problem, and that's probably true in any multifamily situation. But I just think we have to look for solutions, and that I would suggest that to these 2 guys. And so, anyway, I'm not here to suggest to you how to run your department or them how to build their apartments and add parking spaces, but I just think it's something that could be considered.
Okay, anything further? Ms. Sharman?
So the one comment I would make about the parking is that in a situation like this, where I'm assuming tenants are having to lease those garage parking spaces, as opposed to it just being included in the unit, I think that tends itself towards it being used to park a vehicle and not to store junk in it, because you could rent a storage space for much cheaper. The other piece of it too, that I look at beyond just the number of units, is based off the number of, for each style of bedroom. I think a 1-bedroom unit typically lends itself towards a single person living in that, and that was more than 1/3 of the units.
Right.
So when I did the math and said we're gonna have, for the 2 and 3 bedroom units, assume 2 cars each, and for the 1-bedroom units, assumed only 1 car each, that was basically right on target with the number of parking spaces available. So I think it goes beyond just the number of dwelling units. I think the size of those dwelling units is an important factor to look at in the parking. And so for me, I don't really see a concern with the parking situation on this particular site plan.
Okay.
And I ran those same numbers, and I think the cost of these, they're supposed to be high-end apartments, and my suspicion is that the 1-bedroom units will likely have young married couples, which would require 2 cars potentially. So. Plus, there's workers that need to work there.
The point about our code is, I think our present code of 1.5 has been adequate in those situations where there is off-street parking. The difference in this is we don't have the availability of off-street parking, and so it may not be on a daily basis that there could be a problem, but on special occasions, when visitors come, those type of things. So again, I'm encouraging people to try to look ahead and see if there's a proactive solution rather than reacting.
You can't even allow parking on Ward Avenue? The off-street to the bigger buildings, that's not gonna be allowed? I understand Steeplechase, but what about Ward Avenue? The side street?
Do you guys know how Ward's designed? I was under the impression it's not designed for parking, but Mr. Williamson.
It's not currently striped for parking. We did take a look at what could fit in that right-of-way space, and we could probably work with staff to maybe do some restriping there to try to get some on-street parking on one side or the other possibly. The way it's classified, and I'm a planner and landscape architect, so I'm out on the thin branches here a little bit. But I believe the classification for it has a standard section that does not include parking, so I think we would have to.
But that could be maybe something in the future that could be potentially looked at if we saw that there was this problem that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
The curb-to-curb space would be able to provide that.
Would we need sidewalks if we require or allow parking on that street?
There's sidewalks.
Sidewalks are planned.
Oh, they are planned. Okay.
Yeah, on both sides.
Okay, anything further, Mr. Bennett?
I think we need to also say that in spite of questions about parking, the overall project looks very nice. We are in definite need for multifamily and apartments in our communities. And again, I appreciate that it's been moved further west and the 2-story on the east end. So overall, I think it's a very good project, and the trail, the path along Steeplechase. So don't want to just get hung up on the questions about parking. I think overall it's a very good project.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would move that we approve resolution number 2017-38.
Second.
37.
37? Did I skip ahead?
And is there,
Notation, should that be 2018-37 for the resolution number?
Correct.
Okay.
Isn't that what it said?
okay.
It said
It's
38.
typed
Well, I
on
said the
there.
wrong number.
But it's also the wrong year on the sheet.
Okay,
Is that what's happening?
and is there a second?
Second.
I think we
Okay,
have,
Oh, I
there's
see,
a
I
motion
see.
on the floor.
we got another comment.
Oh, Mr. McCarter.
I just want to make certain that we're clear for the record what you're voting on. That the approval of the resolution also assumes the conditions that Mr. Hornbeck laid out in, in his materials. Did the motion intend to capture the conditions that were fastened to it as part of Mr. Hornbeck's presentation?
Well, I thought that it usually is included, but I would include that as part of the motion. That
With the one that was striped, right?
Subject to the one that was stricken. Okay. That's the only clarification I need, and I can work with Ms. Millenbacher to make certain it's clear for the record. Thank you.
Okay, is everybody clear? Okay, if in favor, vote yes, opposed, no. And resolution number 2018-37 passes unanimously. Moving on to item 10, resolution number 2018-38. Resolution accepting the resignation of acting town manager Patty Garcia, declaring a vacancy, and appointing Dean Moyer to serve as successor acting town manager for the town of Windsor. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is legislative action that is required under the charter to make certain that there aren't any vacancies in the executive leadership that's built into the council manager form of government that Windsor follows. Ms. Garcia has tendered her resignation and will be leaving the town as town clerk at the end of this week. And so in order to seamlessly transition between her service as acting town manager and get us through to when Mr. Hale arrives in June, it's been recommended that you appoint Dean Moyer, the finance director, to serve as acting town manager during this roughly 7-week period while we await Mr. Hale's arrival. This resolution satisfies the requirements of the charter and acknowledges that as Ms. Garcia departs town hall, Mr. Moyer will step up and assume responsibilities as acting town manager.
Are there any questions for Mr. McCarter?
One thing I do need to add, it requires a 2/3 majority to appoint an acting town manager.
Okay, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2018-38.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer and a second from Ms. Sharman. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And it passes unanimously. Moving on to item 11, resolution number 2018-39. Resolution approving an agreement of purchase and sale between the Town of Windsor and Vima Partners LLC for the acquisition of real property located in the Laboom Farm annexation to the Town of Windsor. Legislative action, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Before you tonight is a resolution requesting authorization of staff to enter an agreement to acquire some property along Crossroads that ultimately will become a community park. I wanted to, before we get to the details of the acquisition, just kind of give you a brief history of how we arrived to where we're at tonight. So you'll probably recall back in April of 16, I think my staff memo is going around with the resolution right now, but back in April of 16, the current park master plan was adopted, and within that plan was a variety of recommended action items, 2 of which you can see on the board on the screen tonight. Staff has spent a lot of time over the past year and a half working on all of the action items, but specifically these 2. And you'll recall that probably midway of 2017, we ultimately decided with your help as well as the help of the pre-cab board and staff that given what we learned in the master plan that 92% of our residents were within a 10-minute walk of a recreation facility, i.e. a trail, a park, that we no longer needed to focus on neighborhood parks. And so this was the map that we ultimately settled on. And basically what you could see here is everything in green, the words in green with the exception of Takankala, are neighborhood parks that we're, for lack of a better term, on the hook to build, in that we have development agreements to build parks when the time comes. So we have the right to build there. These two locations were, so this one on the left side of the screen and on the north side, also were neighborhood parks that are identified in development agreements for the future. Tacancala, which is right here, that is the property that is adjacent and just north of the new Public Works facility. That would be a community park. Again, acquisition through a development agreement that's already in place. What existed, and if you look at the large bubble, you recall our conversation back throughout last year, is we were lacking a community park on the southern side of Windsor. Specifically, probably most likely being sports, in an effort to try to cut down on some traffic. So for example, the residents that live on the western side of town would not have to drive all the way over to Diamond Valley, all the way across town to play sports, or all the way to the north side of town to the Tacancala site. So the goal there is to spread our athletic facilities in those three community parks so that we could cut down on some of the transportation issues that occur, just people traveling at 4 or 5 o'clock to take their kids to sports. So with that being said, let's go to the next slide. We began, you'll recall, in October of last year, some negotiations, and we were very close, but ultimately did not acquire this site, which we're discussing tonight and is commonly referred to as Lebu Farms. So if you bear with me for a second, this straight line right here going north and south on the western side, this block and this bottom block down here was 48 acres, and that is the property that we discussed back in October to try to acquire and ultimately did not. And at that point, negotiations ceased. Right before the Christmas and New Year holiday, we were approached by the school district because they owned these 75 acres that's on this eastern block already. They were interested in acquiring, they needed a little bit more land for future school sites. And we discussed in a work session in January of this year, ultimately this board approved myself to begin negotiations with the school district to acquire in some form part of the 48 acres, and quite possibly when it comes time to build, which is way down the road for both the school and the town, some joint use facilities there so that we wouldn't, for example, be building 2 football fields or 2 baseball fields. We could build one that we could share use between the town and the school. So that is what we've been working on. The school just recently closed on 19 acres, which is this upper block. That was last Monday. And so what is before you tonight is the acquisition for the town of this bottom half. That is 27.149 acres. And you see, and I'll get to this in a second, but this blue line right here that says Future Iron Wheel Drive, that is running east and west. I drew that line there so as you'll see on this next slide, I wanted to make you very aware of the bottom bullet there. Iron Wheel Drive will go through both town property if we acquire the property as well as the school property, and it will be on the town and the school to build their portions of that road. Our estimate as we sit today is we would have to be build about a quarter mile, which is about $900,000 to build our portion. That's not the school portion. So I wanted to make you aware of that as well as the upper bullet, which is this valuation is based on town fee in lieu. Back in October when we originally began discussions with the property owner, we initially discussed using the 2017 fee in lieu as the price point for the 48 acres. When this came back around, we did this exact same thing in all of the discussions, both on the school side and with the town side, using the fee in lieu, and ultimately, as you'll see in the next screen, settled slightly below the 2017 fee. But I wanted you to be very aware that we did not have an appraisal of the value of the land done, so this is based solely on the town fee in lieu. So before you tonight is staff's recommended approval of the resolution to purchase 27.149 acres. That cost is $1.3 million. As you can see, it works out to $47,918 an acre, which is less than, it's about $5,000 less than the 2018 fee in lieu. The fee in lieu in 17 was 1,000 and some change. So it is slightly less, but again, I wanted to remind you that it is not based on an appraisal. Initial funds will come from the Neighborhood Park Fund. Finance Director has already approved that we can utilize that money to actually make the purchase, but we will reimburse that fund from future community park fees as we collect them. And we are collecting those fees on the Rain Dance development. I believe, and this is off of memory, when that development is built out, we would have acquired about $4.1 million in community park fees based upon today's fees, and those do go up annually, typically based upon the Denver Boulder CPI. And then the last piece there on the screen is I do not anticipate any development by the town of that property. Not speaking for the school, but I would also argue that they don't intend to build on that property for several years. I would probably put a number of 10 plus. This is truly trying to acquire the last community park site so that we have it, as opposed to if we were to wait 5, 10, 15 years to acquire it, we may not be able to acquire it at that time. So this is really trying to acquire and know that we now will own or have the rights to develop all of our neighborhood parks and our community parks. We will know where those sites are, and then when it comes to future acquisitions, as based upon our master plan, we would only be focused on acquisition of trails as well as open space lands. We would know what parks are going to be developed parks within our system at build out. So with that, I will answer any questions you may have. And again, before you is a resolution to authorize staff to purchase the 27 acres.
Any questions, Michelle?
Can you go back to the map slide that you had?
Sure.
Is the little, oh.
This one?
Yes. So is the little chunk that's encased in the blue dots
Down here?
below the future road, would that be part of the park?
That is part of the park. Because my thinking as we sit today is everything north of there is probably joint use with the school. So south of there might be playground. Because, for example, what happens when you share use and share build with a school is we couldn't put a playground out here in the middle because they have security issues of people using school sites during school.
Right.
So what we would probably do is consider maybe community gardens. That might just be natural grass that we use to buffer the site. Again, haven't even really conceptually thought about
but
design,
that is part of the
but it is part of the
acquisition.
park.
And then what about the little chunk of land between that and the black that is
Down here?
currently developed property?
The part above that.
Like basically above the black and below the blue, there's just that little
in between there,
strip
yeah.
of no man's land.
That is owned by the current property owner. I don't know.
This strip of land right there was the subject of a conditional use grant application a year and a half ago, I believe it was. And that's the location for the Great Western Oil and Gas water loadout site. So they were proposing to pump the wastewater from the Rain Dance pad up to that location, and that's where they'll load it on trucks and haul it away.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is I fully support this. We've talked about it a lot. I think it makes absolute sense to secure this site. I don't like last minute. This is like Congress. When do we have a chance to read this? So I don't like it. I don't think it's fair to us or the residents. So that being said, is the $1.10 a square foot the same as the school district? Is that what they paid?
Yes, they paid the same amount.
And I just want to make sure I understood you. We did not waive the community park fee, but we waived the other park fee.
Correct. We waived in the Rain Dance subdivision the neighborhood park fee with the requirement that they would build, and it's about 40 acres of park land within that development, but we did not waive the community park fee.
Anything else? Any Any other questions? Mr. Rittmeyer?
This may be a question for the new town manager-elect. I was, or appointed, sorry, new town manager appointed. I was curious, what's the balance in the fund that this money's gonna come out of? What would it be after this is paid?
I can speak to it. There right now is about $5.5 million in that fund. And so this would take out 1.3. It does not impact in any way any of the parks that we have. For example, we're building Village East Park. That's a $866,000 project this year. It will not impact any future neighborhood park builds in the window that we would be able to pay back the neighborhood park fee fund, I should say.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I would move to approve resolution 20.
Comment here.
Mr. McCarter.
Does the board care to have me review any portion of this contract so that you can at least read it once before you
Have you reviewed it?
What's that?
You reviewed it.
I have reviewed it. And my recommendation is that it does set forth the terms necessary to transfer real property, and the closing is scheduled for Thursday morning at 10 a.m.
Okay,
And I would go ahead and move to approve resolution 2018-39 as presented.
Second.
okay, a motion on the floor from Ms. Sharman and a second from Mr. Adams. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And resolution 2018-39 passes unanimously. Moving on to item 12, February financial report. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. In your packet tonight is the February financial report. I will keep it short tonight. There isn't too many highlights in the February report. I would sum it up in that we are where we are supposed to be at the end of February. Just a couple things about revenue. Sales tax continues strong and ahead of pace. February versus last February is up 19%. Year to date through last February is up 28%. And a lot of that is due to a large payment we received in January, if you remember that. A good sign on February sales tax is February is generally our weakest month in sales tax collections. The fact that we hit 99% of our monthly benchmark bodes well for the rest of the year. So going into the summer, that is a good sign. Construction use tax is lagging just a bit through February. Instead of the benchmark 16%, it is at 12%. We will need to keep an eye on that as we move further into the year. Property tax, we generally do not collect much of this through February, collecting most of it in the period of March through July. So usually by July, we're about done collecting property tax. As far as expenditures, general fund operations are right at 16%. O&M overall is at 13%. We have not yet spent much capital money, only 1% of the budget. Overall, combining O&M and capital spending, we are at 8%. So that being said, short of any questions, that would be my report for this evening.
Don't we have a lot of capital projects that are pending, so what are, I mean.
Well, we just didn't have to pay for anything yet.
Oh,
We're-
so
later-
when will we get hit with all those?
Later in the year.
Okay.
We'll get a little bit up front, like in the spring when we start, and then later in the year, the last quarter of the year, we end up closing those up and writing checks.
Okay, Mr. Rennemeyer?
I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Moyer, about the building permit and construction use tax. It's $100,000 less than what you show as our required monthly collection in February. Do you have any thoughts or? reasons for why it's 100,000 off?
I do not, other than we sold less permits than this time last year. I'm thinking that as we go further into the construction season, hopefully that will catch up. If it does not, if it stays below that line through the rest of the year, we'll have to start considering postponing some projects. Get a little, if don't have the money for them, we may have to set them aside for later in the year or another year.
Can I follow that up with another thought? Sure. Was this kind of, for lack of a better term, due to the, forgive me if I'm wrong, but the sandbagging that kind of happened at the end of 2017? Wasn't there a bunch of people that they came in to buy a bunch of permits because of the fee structure or something like that? Wasn't there at the end of the year? No?
No.
All right, I'm sorry.
I don't recall
I thought that we had an influx where they came in to pay before fees went up or something like that. I'm sorry if I'm off. It's getting late.
Okay. Mr. Baker.
I have a question on the King Soopers Center. It seems like, maybe it's my imagination, is that shrinking as a percentage of our total revenue?
I think it's shrinking as a percentage just
Right.
because there's some other zones that are getting larger.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just,
Yeah.
is that something you look at over time, or obviously you track it, but is that something you could look at, maybe see what the others that are coming up are?
Yes. Yeah, specifically, the Highlands is really taken off. That's out there by Wagner Equipment and that whole area out off of Crossroads in that area.
Does that include the summit?
No,
Okay.
it does not.
Thanks.
I had a
Mr.
similar
Bennett?
question, and I can look at previous charts, but I didn't catch your last comment. What's taken off?
The Highlands.
Highlands, okay.
Yes.
I just wonder if there's any patterns in our sales tax revenue geocodes, so that's the same type of question, if you're seeing any other patterns.
Yeah,
Those increasing?
at the risk of violating any confidentiality
Gotcha.
stuff, the King Super Center has for the longest time been our largest physical location. And I was thinking of this today, driving through town. Lately, we've had some, and in various other geocodes, we've opened new businesses.
Yeah.
And without naming names, have done very well. So you can, and again, staying on the fence here without violating anything, you can see the businesses that are succeeding are pumping up, or making those other geocodes collect more tax and creating a bigger percentage of the pie. So not necessarily King Super's zone is not losing money. It's just not as big of a piece of the pie as it used to be,
Which is good.
which I think is a good thing,
It's
yes.
a very good thing. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Moving on to item D, communications. Communications from our town attorney.
Nothing for me, Madam Mayor.
Communications from town staff. Mr. Ballstead. Ms. Johnson, anything? Mrs. Hoadley. Mr. Lucas.
So I just wanted to share with the board before we actually make the purchase. Thursday night, we had our public comment session on Main Park. And this was option A. We had 43 kids come and vote on which option they would like. So that's A. And this is B. 41 of the children or kids voted for this option. So this is what we will be purchasing. Think I can zoom in a hair.
It's a lot of climbing. and-
So, this structure is 23 feet tall to the top, that ball, not counting the flag. It's kind of like a ship's mast, so the more kids that are up there, it moves and sways a little bit, so it's got some perceived risk to it. There's a slide there.
Perceived risk, it's a net.
Perceived risk. Remember that as a government, we have to meet all safety guidelines, so it is perceived risk. There's a net, so it's kind of like American Ninja Warrior. You can start here climb all of the nets all the way to the top and down the slide without touching the ground if you have the ability to do so. The entire site is accessible, i.e., for example, the main park's playground surface is sand. That is not an accessible surface. This entire site is, so increases that threshold. This is a Cloud9 swing. That's an inclusive piece of equipment where a child with a disability, for example, someone in a wheelchair, could transfer out and swing with his or her buddies at the same time in the same swing. This back in this, it's kind of hard to see it in this back corner over here, is also a modern day version of an inclusive merry-go-round. So again, a child with or without disability can play together with each other in the merry-go-round. There's a 75-foot, I'll zoom over here, 75-foot zip line and a few other pieces there. So wanted to share with you, had great turnout. Only allowed the children to vote because, as you know, we all as parents, like Mr. Rennermeyer, immediately went to risk. Your kids, I'm sure, will be at the top. So anyhow, just wanted to share with you what was selected by the kids. We are now working on color designs. It will not be this because it looks like KU. So we're going to make sure it's a different color. But we're leaning towards the Rockies colors, but we're trying to work on that right now. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you and thank the public for coming out and giving us fabulous comments.
Remind me the cost of that again?
$400,000.
Oh.
I think Mr. Rennermeyer will be the first person to use the urgent care.
I'm gonna get up on the ship's mast and.
Yeah, is there a way?
So remember that the playground is designed for children aged 5 to 12. Doesn't mean you can't play on it, but if you injure yourself after 12, read the sign.
Oh, really? Only to age 12?
Yes. All playgrounds are designed between ages 2 to 5, which is the playground that's on the east side of town, of the main park. And then this one is designed for 5 to 12. What I would tell you, though, is, for example, if you had a 3-year-old, can they climb on this? Mm-hmm. Yes. Sure. It's truly based on their ability. I have seen kids 4 years old climb to the top of this structure other places. It is sheerly based on their ability. So for example, if a child's 4 and can't get to the top level, that's great because as they come back over time, they'll be able to experience that playground in a different way every time they show up.
Mr. Bennett?
I really appreciate the processes that you brought into the planning for this, as well as the Boy Geez, I've been watching that. And I'm really appreciating that this has been a conversation from pre-CAT for 4 or 5 years, is that we wanted to move away from every one of our playground parks being a cookie cutter, so.
This will definitely create some diversity
definitely.
in the park system.
Mr. Baker, did you have something?
No, he answered.
Oh,
I was wondering about a weight limit, but obviously I exceed that.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Communications from, I think I got everybody, right? Mr. Moyer, nothing more? Acting Town Manager, Ms. Garcia?
So, October 13th, 2008 was my first day in Windsor. And I can remember my first day showing up, somebody showed me where my desk was. They gave me the password to get onto my computer and gave me a binder full of documents. And my boss at the time, Kelly Arnold, walked in and says, "You are staying and doing the town board meeting tonight, right?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess so." I mean, didn't know anybody, didn't know anything, and we just, just kind of figured it out. But since that time, I can tell you a lot of processes and procedures at the town of Windsor have improved greatly. Our onboarding processes are amazing, and people instantly feel part of the family here in Windsor. We just talked about Eric and what's happening with Parks and Rec and how that process has changed so much. So it's been really fun to see Windsor grow up and be able to be part of that process. I thank the town board, and I would thank Kelly as well if he was here. I've been given a lot of opportunities that most town clerks don't get. I was able to work with the DDA since its inception. I was able to work with the customer service group and start the water conservation efforts, and it has just been a joy for me to be here and work with all of you and just see Windsor grow up. And you guys have all done such an amazing job. I really appreciate everything that you've given to the community and the things that you've allowed me to do. So wanted to say that, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, last week I went to the Larimer County Transportation Infrastructure Strategies meeting, so I wanted to give you that update. It was very, very preliminary. This was really a kickoff to see if, to gauge the interest if we were wanting to meet again and pursue some options of funding, a tax of some sort in Larimer County to fund infrastructure, transportation, projects. So, and also there's discussion of how an entity would be formed to manage that process. So we all agreed that we should meet again, discuss potential revenue and a potential structure of organizations. I think they want to make it similar to the open space tax for Larimer County. So some money would come back to the town for infrastructure projects in Larimer County. So that was it. And I don't have prepared remarks from Ms. Garcia, but I want to thank her so much for all her service to the town. My first memory, I signed up to run for town board, and she was so welcoming. I could not believe that she was so welcoming to have me run. It was just a great experience. I appreciate that. That's my earliest memory. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I would reiterate Mr. Baker's comments. I appreciate all you've done for this town. I'm so sad to see you go, but so excited for your new adventure. And I think it's a well-deserved honor to move up the municipal ladder, so to speak, in that regard. And I just thank you for all the grace and poise you've shown and all the challenges we have thrown at you the last few months. And the professionalism you have shown is second to none.
Anything else?
I just wanted to third those comments, Patty. You've done a wonderful job.
Okay. Well, and I want to just say a couple things too. Change. So the definition of change: to make different in some particular, to make radically different, to give a different position, course, or direction to. Ms. Garcia is making a change, and as she wishes us farewell this week, I want to publicly recognize and thank her. Patty has been a dedicated town staff member for over 10 years. But I would like to personally thank her for the endless duties she has carried on for myself and the board. I extend my appreciation for her good work over the years in this organization and for setting a fine example for those that will follow. Her service has been valuable, and she has a spirit about her that is infectious and will be missed. But she has a new opportunity, and to that, we wish her all the best, for this is her time to rise and move forward. It has truly been a great pleasure working with her. And now, as she sets off to her next big challenge, we wish her good luck and all the best. Thanks, Patty.
Yay, Patty.
And with that, we shall move into executive session, if I have someone who will make such a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4, subsection E, subsection I, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect for certain economic development incentives, per Ms. Stacy Johnson, our Director of Economic Development.
Second?
All in favor, vote yes, opposed no. And we will move into executive session with like a 5-minute recess.